to 1189, an online Bible commentary. My name is Tyler Marston, and today we're looking at Genesis 5, which is a really exciting chapter because it's our first list of genealogies. Guys, you're so excited for it. I know you've been waiting for this. This is the moment you've been waiting for. So, to remind ourselves of where we've been, the evil of the serpent has spiraled out of control. It's extended to Lamech, and now it's in these civilizations and cities, and there are still humans ruling the world, but they're doing so violently, by their own power, by their own wisdom, by their own lusts. But there's also still people who are worshiping God, calling on the name of the Lord is what it called it at the very end of chapter 4. And God is dedicated to restoring them and all of creation back to that Eden ideal. He's dedicated. So Genesis 5 is going to answer the question, what happens to people who call on the name of the Lord even when they're surrounded by people who don't? And the way it's going to answer this is by giving us a list of the descendants of Adam. This is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day when God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female, and he blessed them, and he named them man in the day when they were created. So the first thing it's got to remind us is that humans were made in the image of God, and this is tracking people who believed that and acted like that and reflected God's image. It's tracking the line of the person who's going to eventually become the offspring of the woman, the snake crusher, who is going to rescue humanity back to God's original plan. And remember what the image of God entails, right? He blesses us to fulfill that calling, to rule and to act like God to the rest of creation, to reflect God's goodness and His mercy and His authority and His love to the rest of His creation, and also multiplying that and being like a fruit and multiplying that goodness and that love. So how do we do that when all around us evil is flourishing and is being supported? We can only control what God has given us authority to control, and we can be an influence on everything else, right? So no matter what everything else is going on in the world, we all have spheres of influence and spheres of authority that God has granted us. And the best we can do is control what we can control, influence what we can influence, and let God deal with the rest of the world, right? And that's what it means to call upon the name of the Lord. Adam has a son named Seth, and it says, he became the father of a son in his own likeness, according to his image. So Adam has Seth, and Seth looks like Adam, and Adam was created in the image of God, right? But it also reminds us that children inherit a lot of trauma from their parents, right? Children end up acting like their parents a lot of the time. And so it's not going to be a perfect situation for Seth if he's in the image of Adam, because Adam was not a perfect image of God. He was only made in the image of God, and he chose poorly, and he chose to not always reflect that. Seth is inheriting all of that from Adam. Seth is made in his image, and so he's going to have the same choice to replay out what Adam did and how Adam failed, or if he's going to trust God and live by His wisdom and be God's image. Just like we were talking about rule and authority and influence. Parents have influence over their children, and the best parents teach their kids to follow God when they're doing it themselves. When parents are following God, it's a lot easier for the kid to look at that and say, I'm going to imitate that. I want to look like that. And they end up acting like God too. When the parents are doing whatever they want to do, the kids see the parents want to imitate that and do whatever they want to do. Now, this line of Adam is not going to be perfect, but they're going to try and do right, at least these descendants that we're following, to the best of their ability. And we'll see that in a few specific key characters, right? And the most interesting is Enoch. Enoch lived 65 years, and he became the father of Methuselah. And then Enoch walked with God. A lot of these characters are set up in a repetitive, this person begat this person, and they did this, and lived this many years, and then they begat this person, and then they died, right? And Enoch breaks from that repetition, which is interesting. Enoch walked with God 300 years, after he became the father of Methuselah, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and where it says everybody else died, Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. So it doesn't say he died, it just says that God took him, which is really interesting and kind of weird, right? Lots of people throughout history have been fascinated with Enoch, and it has inspired Bible scholars for millennia. There's lots of speculations and ideas about his life, but the main point is that he walked with God and that God delivered him. God didn't allow him to experience death. God delivered him from death, and this simple line has huge ramifications for the concept of Christ, the Messiah, who's going to be rescued from death, apparently just like Enoch was. The church and the people who follow Christ are also going to be rescued even from death in the same way, right, that Jesus was. So when we walk with God, follows that he will deliver us from death. He will forgive us for our sins, be merciful for us, and not allow us to experience the consequences of that. And that's only through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so Enoch is a weird part of the story, but that's what I think it means. And of course, there's more genealogy all the way through. It's also interesting that there's a Lamech in Seth's descension. And we talked about Cain's descendant Lamech yesterday, but there's also another guy named Lamech here, right? And there's a guy named Enoch who is a different Enoch in Cain's line of descendants in the last chapter too. So that's another example of, good and evil kind of being blurred. It's hard to tell them apart, is the point. Remember that the tree of knowledge of good and evil looked good, looked like it gave good fruit, and looked very similar to all the other trees in the garden. It's hard to tell the good ones apart from the evil ones, right? Same thing, we've got people with the same name who represent completely different things. We've got a good Lamech and an evil Lamech, a good Enoch and an evil Enoch. They have the same name, but we have to use God's wisdom to tell them apart and to tell good and evil apart. And the thing that gives it away is how they live their lives, whether they walk with God or whether they don't. And then we get to kind of the climax of chapter 5. There was the guy named Lamech, right? And he had a son, and he called his name Noah, saying, "This one will give us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands arising from the ground, which the Lord has cursed." So Noah means rest, right? And Lamech is declaring this over his newborn son Noah, that he's going to be the one to bring us back, to give us rest from our work, to give us rest from the toil of working the ground, which the Lord has cursed back in the Garden of Eden. He's going to be the snake crusher, is what his father Lamech declares over him. He's the guy. He's it. Of course, that's what the good Lamech says about Noah, that he's going to return everyone to the Garden of Paradise, to a perfect relationship with God, and at a time full of endless seventh days, endless rest. And I guess we'll see what he's all about, but that's all for chapter 5. The moral of the story is that God does not give up on people who call on the name of the Lord and are committed to being the image of God. He blesses and sustains people like Enoch, people like Noah, who walk with him and live righteously. That should be an encouragement to us if we're walking with him and living righteously. So I guess we'll see what Noah is all about next week. But thank you for watching 1189, and I hope that you have a good day. And let me know what you think about Genesis 5 in the comments below if you have any opinions on it or if you've ever read it before. And I hope to see you next week. Thanks for watching. God bless.